welcome to the Press Box. My name is Melissa Ponzio, and for the next 30 minutes, I'll be your host on Atlanta's newest sports talk show. With me, as always, is Ty Reynolds. How you doing?
Oh, we're doing great.
Good. And our special guest speaker today is Mike Sammond. How are you?
Doing fine. By the way, Steve Marcos, producer, I saw he got his street hockey in that open. Good job, Steve.
Yes, yes. Good, Steve. Let's talk about the Braves. We are champions.
That is a tremendous way to end the season. There was a lot of emotion, and everyone thought that this team was down and out, and they were really struggling against Draybeck offensively. But looking at this realistically, the Braves had played 2 poor games at the end of the series. Here they were up 3-1. They really needed to put these guys away, and they just did not get the job done and almost blew this thing. I mean, we were almost looking at a major choke job here. But to their credit, they showed a lot of character and did what they needed to do to win the game. But it was close. It was really close.
I guess I'll play Mike Lupica here, and I'll kind of argue with it a little bit. I don't think it was a choke job at all because you got to remember, I mean, last year, Steve Avery, Tom Glavine, they were supermen. John Smoltz, he was a great pitcher last year, and he's did it again this year. And those guys show that they're human again. And, you know, Van Slyke and Bonds, how long can you hold those guys down? They finally broke out. Let's give Pittsburgh credit. They're a good team. Atlanta almost lost it there, that 7th game. I think either team would have been a good representative. But now we look ahead to Toronto. And Braves, if you think you had a battle with Pittsburgh, wait till you see Toronto.
Well, what I want to get back is that here it is. I had rarely seen this team play 2 such poor games in a row. And 3, I mean, here it is. You go through 162 games in a season. And we rarely saw the Braves play 3 poor games in a row. And here it is when it came to crunch time. I thought they really struggled, and that's why I consider that almost a choke job. But they didn't. They won, and that's the bottom line.
Okay. But before we get on with this conversation, I want to point out that if anyone wants to call in with any comments or questions, our number here is 873-6713. Okay,
just one point. I don't know if anybody out there will agree with me, but I think losing those 2 games, not only losing them but getting embarrassed, might have been a good thing for them. It woke them up because they were looking good 3-1. Everyone figured, oh, they're going to make the World Series easily. Now they know they're going to have to fight. It's not going to be handed to them on a silver platter.
Well, Mike, I hope you're right.
Okay, let's talk about how these 2 teams match up.
Tell you what, I categorize this series. I've got 5 things to cover here. Of course, hitting, starting pitching, the bullpen, speed, and defense. And they are very close in all 5 areas. The defense, I think, offsets one another. The starting pitching, the Braves had the best starting pitching, or rather, well, the best ERA in the National League. So for the starting pitching, I give the Braves the advantage. Their ERA for the team was 3.14. Mike, I know you're looking at me a little funny because of the way they performed lately. The bullpen, you got to give that to Toronto. There's no doubt about it. A former Brave in the bullpen, Ward, along with the Terminator, Hinkie, combined for about 50 saves almost. Speed, again, I give a slight advantage to the Braves. Braves have a lot of team speed, although Toronto does have White and Alomar. And hitting, I got to give the advantage to Toronto. During the season, they scored 100 more runs than the Braves.
Just some points, my observations on Toronto. First of all, they have that guy, Jack Morris. Last year with the Twins, he killed them. He's doing the same this year. He almost single-handedly helped the team get past
You had
Oakland.
to bring him up, didn't you?
Yeah, I had to bring up Jack Morris because he's going to be a big key. He's going to be the number 1 starter tomorrow night. And so that's going to be tough to beat him. That guy gets better. He's a money pitcher. He does well in the postseason. A well-rounded team, Toronto. They hit a lot of home runs. One interesting fact, Ty, this is a team that played all their home games on artificial surface. They had a terrible record. Well, not a terrible record, but a more down-to-earth record on the grass. So that's going to be quite a transition for them. So I think they're going to have some troubles in Atlanta playing on that on the real grass as opposed to playing at the Sky Dome. Also, one thing that we might want to bring up, hasn't been mentioned yet in the papers, haven't been talked about too much. Keep in mind they're going to have a DH in this World Series. It'll be interesting to see who the Braves have in that spot.
I'm thinking that might be Lonnie Smith, but we'll see.
I agree.
As far as the pitchers for Toronto, they're all right-handed. Do you think that'll be a factor in this series?
Well, it'll be a factor when it comes into making decisions by Bobby Cox about what players that he's going to play. the thing is that if he's going to load the lineup, of course, with his left-handed starters, obviously. Now, Toronto has a guy named Jimmy Key to come out who was 13-13 with about a 3.5 ERA. If the bullpen, or rather the starting pitching, gets in trouble early, you might see him bring Key out, and then Bobby Cox is going to have a decision to make whether to bring in a guy like Brian Hunter. We'll wait and see.
You mentioned how Toronto has right-handed pitching. The Braves, of course, have left-handed pitching with Glavine and Avery. And Toronto, obviously, just like most major league teams, doesn't hit left-handed pitching as well. So they'll have a couple negatives. They're going to face some good lefties. The Toronto Blue Jays might be just what the doctor ordered for Avery and Glavine to break out of their slumps.
Maybe, but boy, do they have some big right-handed bats in that lineup. You got Joe Carter, who had 34 home runs. You have Dave Winfield, and God only knows when he's going to retire. He's like a fine wine. He's getting better with age all of a sudden. They have some good right-handed bats in that lineup.
And one last thing, Melissa, is that the Toronto Blue Jays, you say they do have a lot of power. I believe they set an American League Championship record, series record, for most home runs in this series against Oakland. So the launching pad may live up to its name this next weekend.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about this four-man rotation. Now, there's been speculation. What do you think? Do you think it's a good idea?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea because just the fact that Charlie Lebrand and Pete Smith deserve the shot. Pete Smith is getting great run support when he's out there. He's getting over 5 runs every time he takes the mound. And so the Braves, who had some trouble scoring some runs against the Pirates, maybe having Pete Smith out there, they'll score some more runs for him and keep that going. They deserve the chance. Avery and Glavine have struggled a little bit, but don't be surprised if not only he starts with a 4-man rotation and then Bobby Cox changes back to a 3-man rotation if he needs to get John Smoltz in there some way or another.
Mm-hmm. I agree totally. Glavine's going to start game 1. If he gets in trouble, you might see Smith or Charlie come out early. You're right. Those were 2 money pitchers down the stretch in September. Pete Smith was 7-0 with a 2.05 ERA. Charlie was 15-7 during the year with about a 3.36 ERA. And I can't think of 2 more productive pitchers for Atlanta in September than those 2. I'd like to see either one come out in game 2 and then in game 3 come out with a well-rested Smoltz where he can show them his best fastball.
And I'd love to see Charlie Lebrand have a great game and maybe win a game because when you think of Charlie Lebrand last year in the World Series, what do you think of?
Right, you think of him coming out of the bullpen and giving up the home run.
Kirby Puckett. So
yeah.
I'd love to see him get another chance.
Me too.
What happened to Glavine in the 6th game? Now, he's been strong all year. The whole pitching has been strong all year. What happened?
Tommy Glavine, 20-8, about a 2.8 ERA. He was destined for the Cy Young Award. Then he had the rib injury. I personally think it's because he's lost something off of his fastball. Glavine's a type of pitcher that likes to throw breaking balls, curve balls, and let-ups on the outside corner to right-handed hitters and then bust them on the inside with a fastball. And against Pittsburgh in that game, Barry Bonds hit a home run, and he hit it off of a 1-2 inside fastball, while other Pittsburgh players, right-handed hitters, were leaning out over the plate and hitting outside pitches in the right field for little singles. So I think he's lost a little bit off of his fastball.
Well, the Pirates just showed why they led the National League East most of the year. They can hit, and it was kind of
once it started, it just snowballed.
It was uncharacteristic for them not to be hitting in those first couple of games, so they finally became the Pirate club that we're used to seeing.
Okay, well, we have a phone call right now. Hi, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, this is for anybody who wants to answer it. I was just wondering who Ty thinks the DH rule is going to benefit more and how they're going to play it, how the Braves are going to play that.
Okay.
I'll hang up and listen.
All right, thank you.
Good question. What the DH rule, that's going to enable Toronto to get Dave Winfield in the lineup for sure. But another stick that they have out there in the outfield is Kenny Maldonado, who also hit 20 home runs. So they're going to get some production out of that position. The Braves can go with a guy like Lonnie Smith, who has a very good on-base average, pretty decent speed for an old man, and can still get you some big hits. And he's a veteran with postseason experience. But I think it would favor Toronto a little bit.
I think it favors them a lot a bit, if I can say that, because Toronto is a team, they use the DH all year. They're used to having it. Just like if this World Series, the pitchers were allowed to hit, big advantage for the Braves. But unfortunately, it's an even year. The DH is going to be in there for Toronto. And speaking of the DH, you mentioned Lonnie Smith, a possible candidate. I want to make one point about Francisco Cabrera, Frankie Cabrera, he's been the hero. Well, a lot of folks say, who was this guy? Well, I've been in minor league baseball the last couple of years, and if you're in the minors, he's no secret. He was the International League MVP in 1989. The guy can hit, and he showed it in dramatic fashion in Game 7 the other day.
Hey, talk about dramatics. What about that big home run he hit off a dibble last year up there in Cincinnati? So you're right.
Okay. We have a phone call right now. Hi, caller. You're on the air.
I wanted to know if Deion Sanders was going to play in the World Series.
Okay. Thank you for your call, guys.
Yeah, he is. He's on the roster. Bobby Cox said there was no question about it. John Sherholtz hasn't passed in the roster yet to the National League office yet. You know, there's no reason to. He still has another day before, or not another day, but he has a few more hours before he has to pass it in, so no reason to lock himself in just yet. There's talk that Pena may be back, that Kent Merker actually injured himself in the celebration after game number 7, so it looks like Alejandro Pena might be back on the roster. But Bobby Cox says there's no bones about it. Deion Sanders is going to be there, and really they could use his speed. Deion Sanders, really the only reason he's on that roster is because of his speed right now, although with the DH, that's a good bat you could put in there as well. Just like Francisco Cabrera, the only reason he was on the roster is to pinch hit once in a while.
I think you hit the nail on the head. What were we missing last year? We were missing Otis Nixon and Deion against an American League club that I don't think sees as much speed. I think that's going to make a big difference, and I don't know how that's going to affect those Toronto pitchers, but I can assure you, when Deion and Gant and Otis get on base, it's going to affect them. They're going to know they're there, and if they don't, they're going to pay.
Really quick, while we are on the subject with Deion, do you think this Tim McCarver situation is going to hurt him at all?
Hurt Deion? If anything, it might make Deion play a little bit harder. Tim McCarver obviously is not a fan. I kind of disagree with what Tim McCarver said, too. I don't know if you heard it. It was right there in the middle of the series, game 4, 5, or 6. Well, what I had heard him say, and not just what I've read, but what I heard him say was he thought it was selfish and he wasn't being a team player, where I think Deion was being a team player. And after all, I mean, his Falcon teammates love him, his Brave teammates love him. I think Sean McDonough really hit it on the head. McDonough said, really, it's not the fact that he played 2 sports in one day. The fact is, he originally signed with the Falcons and said he would not play baseball. He reneged on that agreement, then gave John Sherholtz his word that he would be with them for the postseason, and then he reneged on that. So all of a sudden, you know, his word is no good anymore. But I think he's a team player. He plays hard. He's a great athlete. We all know that. I think McCarver was kind of off base, and I think the other announcer kind of summed it up.
If there's any player that can thrive off of controversy, it's Deion, and I'll just say that. Let
me add one last thing. When Deion Sanders first came to Atlanta as a Falcon, I got to interview him in the locker room, and he put it succinctly when he said, "The thrill is here," and he has been thrilling ever since he's been here. It's unfortunate he's refusing to talk to local media. That's just hurting his image, but you know, it's a good thing he's not in New York City where they would really roast him.
Well, you say that the thrill is here, but how long will Deion be here?
I don't know if he's wearing out his welcome or not. I think, you know, you talk to a lot of fans. A lot of fans think he's great, like you say. I mean, he's exciting to watch. There's no question about that. But I think some people are kind of tired of it, of the me, as opposed to the team, when maybe he should have, you know, kept his word and stayed with the Braves. He's an exciting player, and as George Steinbrenner once said, the value of a player is how many fannies he can put in the seats. And a lot of folks come out to watch Deion. He's worth a lot of money to both the Braves and the Falcons. So I think just for that reason, he'll be around for a little while here.
And he's worth a lot of money to a shoe company.
True. Well, let's turn our focus now to football. And with our preseason picks, Jim picked Detroit and Ty, you picked Chicago, but Minnesota has been very strong.
Tell you what, you talk about a coaching change that's really creative, really a positive influence. Dennis Green has done an excellent job up there. Minnesota's offense has scored 160 points in 6 games this year. That's tied for second in the NFL. Minnesota's a tough team, and they showed that in the preseason. Chicago, they have just been giving up way too many points, and that was really evident in the game against Atlanta. They just give up too many big plays, and I know Mike Ditka's not happy. He was happy with his offense after they beat the Falcons, but he was really not happy with the defense. As for Detroit, Detroit came out of nowhere last year, and now I think a few teams are paying a little bit more attention to them and are adjusting their defenses more to the style of offense that they have.
I think Minnesota's the team to beat in the NFC Central. I guess we're just starting on that division, but the new head coach, Herschel Walker. That whole thing was a big blow up, a big distraction last year. And the funny thing is, Herschel leaving one team, going to another, has made both teams, the Vikings and the Eagles, both are better teams because of that.
Now, how do you explain Minnesota's success? Do you think it's just the coaching change?
I think Minnesota a couple of years ago had one of the more powerful teams in football, but there was a lot of trouble and animosity on the team because of the ownership, the coach, and the players. I mean, the players felt that the management just wasn't paying them the money that they deserved, and I just really feel that it was animosity on the team, and Minnesota is really showing what they've got right now. That's a good football club.
And a pansy schedule hasn't hurt either.
No, that'll always help.
Okay, let's talk about the Falcons and the 49ers. They play this Sunday.
Well, San Francisco is the other team that scored 160 points this year, and this is going to be a high-scoring football game. The Falcons are going to be in a shootout, and they're going to have to depend on big plays to stay in this game and somehow win it. I don't think they're counting on Deion being there, obviously. I wouldn't either. I think the Falcons are in for a long afternoon.
That's $180,000 out of Deion's pocket if he doesn't show up for that game, by the way.
Wow.
That's something like 1/17 of his paycheck with the Falcons. But, when you think of the Falcons, you think of the red gun offense and all those points they're supposed to score. Well, they have been scoring a lot of points, but unfortunately they've given up more points than they've scored this year, and that the defense has really killed them. They need a guy like Deion Sanders and Tim McKyer to be back there. It's a disappointing season so far for the Falcons. They're 2-4, and another loss or two, and the season's going to be over.
Okay, what about Philadelphia and Washington?
Important game. Philadelphia's 4-1, Washington's 3-2. The two losses have come to teams in their own division. And Washington, I think, is going to win this game. They're a well-coached football team, and they're at home. And at the beginning of the year, Washington struggled offensively with their timing. They had a little bit of controversy with their quarterback holding out for a little while. And I think they're over that now. And they're taking care of business the way they should be, and I just think Washington's going to win that game.
Mark Rippon's holdout really hurt him. He is not in midseason form, so I think the Eagles are going to win easily. It's great to see Herschel Walker finally be used the way he's supposed to be used, getting the ball a lot. I think the Eagles are for real this year, and I think they're going to I disagree with your prediction.
Easily.
I say Philadelphia.
I'll say a tight game, Washington, in Washington.
Okay, well, now we have a very, very special guest. We have our own Jeff Richardson to come in and give his high school football report. Jeff?
Well, thanks, Melissa. Thanks for having me on tonight, guys. I'm going to be sitting in periodically and talk about high school football. And first, we're going to move to Marietta at Lassiter tonight. It's a big game in the Atlanta area. One of the more interesting stories is Marietta's Amel Jackson. He's one of the top players in the Southeast. Sort of a small running back. The most interesting thing is he tore up his knee and had 5 knee surgeries during the offseason. And somehow he's rehabilitated himself and made it back. Run for about 350 yards and 7 touchdowns in 4 games. We've got a little bit of film on him if the guys in the back want to go ahead and cue that up. Okay, I think it's running now. You're going to see Jackson take off on the right, go around the right end here for a nice long gain. As I said, he's a small back. He's 5'7", 175 pounds, and runs about a 4.45 40. I think he's probably leaning towards Clemson or Alabama at this point in time. Some of the bigger schools backed off when he hurt his knee, and I think that might have cost some of the local schools a shot at getting this great player from Marietta. Another interesting player in the Atlanta area is Druid Hills. They have a junior running back named Quatez Dudley. He's about a 220-pound back. He runs a 4.6. The interesting story behind him is last year as a sophomore, he only played in 5 games because he was shot in a drive-by shooting. Somehow he's come back from that. Last week he ran for 405 yards and 5 touchdowns. Coach loves him, says Miami's been on him since he was a freshman. Like I said, a very interesting story. Next, let's go on over to Lakeside in DeKalb County. They have a great program. They were AAA, tied for the AAA title last year. They have a running back named T.J. Johnson, 5'8", 180. He ran for DeKalb County. He's got the all-time record in DeKalb County for rushing. He's run for about 700 yards and 10 touchdowns so far this year. I think we've got a piece of film on him if the guys in the back will cue that up. All right, well, there you see he takes a pitch and goes down the right side. Number 85 throws a big block for him. That's Todd Stevenson. He's also a big lineman that's being recruited nationally by Notre Dame, among other schools. I think finally, let's see, Marist at Stockbridge is an interesting ball game. Marist has won 35 straight regular season games. They're undefeated this year, obviously. Stockbridge is 4-1. Mario's got a player that plays both ways. Benji Wood, he's a linebacker, running back type of kid. He's great grades, and I think the University of Georgia is looking at him. And with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up and throw it back to Melissa and the guys, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Good job.
Now, let's turn our attention to college football.
All right.
All right? Now, Miami just had 2 very impressive victories, but Washington is still number 1. Do you agree or disagree?
I disagree. I would have put Miami number 1. First of all, the reason that they were moved from number 1 to begin with was because they barely beat Arizona at home. And then now we're starting to find out that Arizona's a pretty good football club. They really beat up on UCLA pretty bad out there in Tucson and beat them 23-3. And the games that Miami just recently won, one against Florida State and one against Penn State, those are 2 games that basically they should have lost. And they just come out, they get the big plays. They have an awesome defense that keeps them in games, and the big plays that they get win football games for them. So, yeah, with that schedule that they've had, I would vote them number 1.
Well, they keep winning. How can they fall in the polls and keep winning and beating teams like Florida State and Notre Dame? I think proves that they are one of the top teams, if not the top team now. Should Washington be number 1? Some folks say, well, they play out there on the West Coast. They don't play as tough a competition. Until they somehow figure out some way to have the number 1 team play the number 2 team, not have this stuff about teams even before the season begins already locked in a bowl bid like we've seen some teams. Until we see a real national championship, maybe a playoff format, which I would love to see, we'll never know who's actually the best, and it'll always be in the hands of a lot of newspaper writers and broadcasters and a lot of folks who, let's face it, the guys on the East Coast who cover football probably have not seen Washington play.
What about the new Bowl Alliance?
Well, I think that's at least a start. We might be able to somehow get number 1 against number 2. I like the playoff format as opposed to a bowl alliance, but right now that seems to be the best thing, so we'll see what happens this year.
Now, that'll be tough because you got number 2 Washington, and they don't even have to play UCLA this year in the conference, and if they get their win against Stanford later on in the season, I really don't see anyone else giving Washington any problems, and they'll go to the Rose Bowl. And Michigan, that's just a god-awful conference this year, the Big Ten. That is just a terrible league. Michigan's head and shoulders above anyone else, and there's no way I can see them losing another game in that conference this year. I think you're going to see Washington and Michigan in the Rose Bowl, and then you're going to see Miami playing somebody else.
Come on, Ty, don't beat around the bush. What do you really think about that conference?
I don't like them.
What about the SEC championship in Birmingham?
There's a big game this week that's going to have some significance on that, and as a matter of fact, it may be the same matchup. Alabama at Tennessee. Tennessee still is in the driver's seat despite that loss last week to Arkansas. And Alabama holds their own destiny on the other side of the division. And this is going to be a good football game. I think Alabama's defense is going to dictate the tempo of this game. And what Tennessee needs to do to win this football game is to have their defense cause some scoring opportunities, because I really don't think Alabama's offense is that good. I think they have an awesome defense.
Okay, I'm going to break in really quick because we have a phone call. Hi, caller, you're on the air. Hello?
Yes?
Your question, please.
Yes. What do you think Georgia's chances are of getting to the Sugar Bowl?
Okay. Guys,
Well,
thank you for your call.
As much as I hate to admit it, I actually agree with you for that SEC championship game at the Georgia Dome. I think it's going to be Alabama against Tennessee. Alabama in a cakewalk in the Western Division, and Tennessee and Georgia battling in the Eastern Division. But unfortunately, Georgia, they still have those 3 games at the end of the schedule: Auburn, Georgia Tech, and Florida. They're going to lose at least one of those, and I wouldn't be surprised if they lost 2 or 3. But then again, I wouldn't be surprised if they won all 3. Those are 3 good quality teams they're playing. As we said before the show, Auburn might be the sleeper. No one's heard of, thinks about them because they started this year so poorly. But that's a good team with a decent quarterback right now in Stan White. But I think Georgia's going to lose at least one of those 3 games. And I think Tennessee, despite the fact that Johnny Majors is back and he's been under a lot of heat in Tennessee, they want the old guy back. But I think Tennessee's going to hold on.
You think they're going to win that game tomorrow?
Georgia Vanderbilt?
No, Tennessee, Alabama. No, I'm going to give you a tough game.
I haven't put too much thought into it, to be honest with you. Is that game in Knoxville?
It's in Knoxville.
Because I passed some Alabama fans going up 85 this afternoon heading to Knoxville. I think Tennessee's going to bounce back after a disappointing loss, and I think they're going to win it.
I would say Tennessee by a mistake. Maybe
Mistake.
by a field goal off of
Okay.
a mistake.
But hasn't Alabama won the last 6?
They have. You got to lose sooner or later. I mean, how many times in a row?
You don't have to.
How many times in a row can you beat Tennessee? That's a solid football program up there. But I just, at the beginning of the year, I felt that this was Tennessee's year to bounce back in that series.
And as much as we hate to admit this, being Georgia alums, and to answer that caller's question, I think Georgia's not going to be in the Sugar Bowl this year. I think we both agree on that.
Well, it would really be tough. And I tell you what, if Ray Goff loses those final 3 games, he better run for cover. There'll be some unhappy people.
Okay, what do you think about Florida State and Tech?
Good football game. Tech, though, their defense is in for a real treat. They're going to have to hope that Charlie Ward goes out there and throws some interceptions or drops a ball on the carpet. They're going to need Florida State to help them out to win that football game. Florida State's got a little more depth, and Tech just lost the services of nose guard Kevin Battle right out of Atlanta here, and that's going to affect them. So I think Florida State's going to win the game.
Charlie Ward hasn't won me over yet as a quarterback. He really has trouble passing, although he can run, as you might expect. I'm going to go out on a limb, though, and stop me if you've heard this before. Scott Sisson, a field goal at the end to win it for Tech. We've heard that before.
A couple of times.
Okay, now you mentioned Auburn before. What about Auburn and Florida? Now that's next weekend, because I'm going to be there. So you better be nice.
And who are you rooting for, I wonder?
Gators, thank you.
I have to go with that Stan White, even though he's a sophomore and has really turned things around after a poor start this year. He's still learning, although he's a very mature quarterback. I like him. I think he's going to be a Heisman candidate his senior year. But right now he's still learning, and I'm not sold on Auburn. And Florida, they're tough to beat at home, real tough to beat, as Georgia's going to find out.
Well, Ty?
Well, Auburn has got a solid defense, and a lot of people don't know about this, but Pat Dye has recruited some awesome defensive players the past couple of years, and defense is just the status quo at Auburn. They're always going to have good defensive football players. I think their offense is a little suspect. I think Florida can take advantage of it. Florida's got a very young offensive line, but they've gotten a little experience now. Spurrier has been playing a lot of young players this year, and I think that's why they've gotten off to a so-so start. But Auburn never wins down at Florida Field.
I think Florida's going to embarrass them.
Well, I hope they do. So, Jeff, if you're watching, I'm rooting for the Gators, and no matter what you say, they will win. Thank you very much. What about Colorado and Oklahoma?
Big game out in the Big 8, and Colorado's undefeated, and, of course, this is an important football game for them to stay in the race for the Big 8 championship, the Orange Bowl, and potentially a national championship. Oklahoma is coming off of a big emotional loss in Dallas to Texas. And so that's going to be an interesting football game. They would really like to bounce back. And if Oklahoma can get the lead in this game, Colorado's in trouble.
They still play football in the Big 8.
Believe it or not,
Yeah,
it's not basketball yet.
Yeah, don't worry about the game. I mean, it's not going to have any bearing, I don't think, on the national championship. I think your national champion is going to come out of the SEC or even the Pac-10 with Washington or one of the independents, or the ACC now with some strong teams there. But they still play football there, huh?
Yeah.
What about Texas A&M as a dark horse?
Well, they have an easy schedule, and that's really helped them out a lot, but I really haven't been impressed with them this year. At the beginning of the year, I thought they had a very good chance for a national championship because of their schedule. And they have a game late in the year versus Texas in Austin on the UT campus. And I think they may run into some trouble there.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank both of you. It was a great show.
Hey, it's always fun.
Yes. And we will be back next Friday at 8:30. So tune in. And Jeff, thank you very much for your report. And go Gators. We'll see you next Friday. Thanks.